Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. Now, today I'm going to do the long-awaited, I've been waiting to make this up for you, MAC Pro palette. Now, have you ever thought to yourself, there's certain colours that I really love, but I can't find them together in a palette. So I have to use 3 palettes to get those colours. Or do you ever get frustrated that you've got a palette and you use 3 out of 6 of the colours and then you waste the others because you never use them? Well, if either of those questions you answered yes to, then you may be interested in looking at making up a palette of your own from MAC. And this is called the MAC Pro palettes. I'm just going to show you the box. You get your own blank palette and then you start making up your colours. And your colours come in these little packets here. I'm going to show you that here. Just to give you an example, when you take it out, you get a tiny little eyeshadow like that to put in your palette. Now I'm going to get into that in a bit more detail in a minute. But first of all, I want to sort of go through a few tips and tricks for how to choose the colours for a palette. Okay, so let's get into that first. Okay, so you can actually make up your own face palette as well, but I'm not going to talk about that today. I'll just concentrate on the eyeshadow palettes. Now, before you start, you need to decide how many shadows you're going to get. You can make up a 15-pan palette. You can make up a 9-pan palette. You can make up a 6-pan palette, or you can make up a 4-pan palette or a 2-pan palette. Okay, so lots to choose from there. Now, I am going to talk about how I picked the colours for my 6-pan palette. This is a 6-pan. I would say if you want to dip your toes in, you could go for a 2-pan palette. The only thing is you're possibly not likely to get everything you want in a 2-pan palette, unless you just want the 2 colours, but you're not going to get your highlighter, and you know you're not going to get the one to line your eyes with, that kind of thing. But you might just want to try out 2 colours, in which case go for a 2-pan. The other thing is you can go for a 4-pan, but I'm going to talk to you about my kind of process for going for a 6-pan. Okay, so it's very likely that even if you haven't found a palette that has got the right combinations or the right colours that you want, that you're going to find it by making up your palette this way. MAC do 136 different single palettes to put in these. So the world is your oyster. The only limit is your own imagination. All right. Now, it is worth saying before we start going through how you're going to choose your colours and how many, numbers of pans you're going to use, 15, 9, 6. This is an expensive way of doing it. That is the con to this. Is it's an expensive way of doing it. It does work out more expensive than buying a pre-made up palette. But the advantage is that when you get the palette, you know that you're going to use all the colours. Other thing to say is that some of these pans, these little eyeshadows here, they're £10 each. I'm going to put all the prices below, so don't worry if you don't take this in. But these are £10 each in MAC. Some of them, the Dazzle ones, are £12, but it is worth shopping around because John Lewis and Look Fantastic have deals on at different times of the year. I got mine for £8, okay? So, and that makes a big difference if you're making up a palette. You know, £2 off is going to make a big difference if you're making up a palette of 15, say, for example. All right? Okay, so where do you start with 136 colours? Well, let me tell you how I started. And this is the third palette I've made up now. So I actually looked at my winter wardrobe, and it's probably no surprise given what I'm wearing right now, that the majority of clothes that I have in my winter wardrobe are either teal or purple. And I thought I really would like a palette that is going to go with teal and purple, okay, and to match. Now, you may not want to match your clothes, but it is worth having a look, first of all, at what is the wardrobe that you generally wear. And you might be like me, you might have a completely different colour scheme in the spring, when I tend to go for more corals and bright blues. And then in the winter, you go for different colours. If so, you decide whether you want a winter palette or a spring palette, I suppose. But it's definitely a good start is to look at the clothes that you've got. Now, then you can choose whether or not you want to match the colours to some of the clothes, which is what I did. Or you may want something that is going to complement those shades. So, for example, you might have a lot of teals, but you might think, I want to go for golds, because golds really complement teal. I don't particularly want to wear teal on my eyes. And again, that will give you an idea. All right? So that is the first step in the process. So the next thing I did was to go on to Google, and I Googled purple and teal eyeshadow looks. Now, of course, you don't need to have a teal and purple eyeshadow look. You could have a purple look and a teal look, and you could use them separately on different occasions. But I really wanted to combine the two. So I went onto Google, and you can find an awful lot on Pinterest. So then it gives you some ideas about what kind of colours, apart from teal and purple, that you want to put in your palette. So, for example, when I went to look at teal and purple looks, not only did you have the teal and purple, but I noticed that a lot of people used quite a bright pink to blend out the purple at the top of the eyeshadow, and I really liked that look. So it basically told me that I wanted to get a bright pink in my palette. Okay, so it's really useful to do that, because you might have an idea of two colours that you want, but then when you have a look at some of the looks using those particular eyeshadow looks, you might see another colour that complements it in those looks, and you think, I like that look, I want to try it with that colour. So that would be my next step. Right, the next thing I do with a £6 palette is I've got my two colours, purple and teal. And I want matte versions of both of them, definitely, okay? And I also want to think about having the shimmer version of both of them. Now, I didn't actually go for a shimmer version of purple, although I was looking to do that, because I just didn't like the shimmer purples that I saw. They weren't really the kind of thing that I would want to put in this look, which is why it's really useful as a first step to look at looks using those colours, okay? But that would be my first step, is to take the two colours, that your main colours that you want, and is to find the matte version and the shimmer version. So at least you can kind of start to rule out and rule in what you want to put in your palette. The next thing I would say is that if you want this to be an all-in-one palette that is going to go with your clothes and you're going to pick up and go, and you're not going to pick up 10 other palettes, which kind of defeats the object if you're getting a bespoke palette, then you really want a transition shade to kind of blend out any eyeshadows that are difficult to blend. You want a highlighting shade to kind of dot in the middle of your eyes, maybe to make your eyelids pop, and actually to put under your brow as a highlighter. And you want to put those in there. You want to get those in. And possibly, if your matte shades of your two chosen colours are not that dark, you might even want to put a black in there. You may not, because you've got it in an eyeliner. And that, again, is your choice. But those are things to think about. So that is your next step. Okay, now we're down to the fun part, which is going on to MAC and picking out the colours that you really like. You've got an idea that maybe you're going for purple and teal. I'm just using mine as an example. You can actually, what really helps you don't have to go through 136 shades and completely confuse yourself. Because when you go onto the site, you can actually click purples, browns, and it will filter it down for you. So if you've got in your head that you want a green, you can click on greens and it will come up with all the greens that they have available. Be aware that there are the regular ones, and there's two other varieties of these pro palettes. There are the Dazzle shadows, which are sort of very shimmery, that you might want to put on your lids. And there's also something called the Powder Kiss formula, which are generally matte colours. They're only one of them. I think the Dazzle shadows, you've got a choice of 14, and the Powder Kiss ones, you've got a choice of 10. And then the other ones, you've got a choice of 112. Okay. So, but apart from having to look at those three sections, otherwise you can kind of narrow it down to the colour that you want to look at, and then not have to look through all of those shades all at once. Okay, so let's say you've picked out 10 shades that you really like. Because let's face it, you are going to do that. You're not going to pick out 6 straight away. You're going to pick out more than you need, and you're going to start thinking, oh, do I need to make up a bigger palette? Don't worry about that. Pick out all those shades. Make a note of what the shade names are. And then, very, very important step, because this helped me to whittle down what I wanted to buy. The next thing I would really recommend that you do once you've got your colours is to go into a website called Temptalia. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Temptalia, but it is like one of the best kind of reference libraries for swatches that I've ever found on the internet. She's got everything on there, really everything. So you go into the Temptalia site and you look up each shade, and I guarantee she'll have them all on there. I can't think of any that have not been on there, unless it's something that maybe has just come out in the last couple of weeks. You will find that shade, and you will find a swatch, and she does swatches on her arm, and she often does swatches on her eye as well. Now, the reason I would suggest you do that is because when sometimes I was looking and I was choosing out colours to put into this, a lot of the colour times I thought, oh, I like that. And then when I actually went on to Temptalia's site, it either looked nothing like that once you saw it swatched on her, or she gave it a review of a D because she said it wasn't very pigmented and it didn't last. And that happened with a couple of my choices. One of them was the very bright pink. I was going to choose Sushi Flower. And I went on, looked at Temptalia, and she'd really given it a low grading and said that it was hardly any pigment to it at all. And I thought, I don't want that. I want the pink to be seen. So I actually made me choose another pink, which was Passionate. And I also did it with the shimmery purple. Okay, an awful lot of talking here, but this will really help you to narrow it down. Okay, next step. Screenshot all Temptalia's swatches. And if you can, look at them together. Do they look like they would work together? Is it what you want? So you're kind of, by screenshotting them and looking at all of them together, all the swatches together, you're seeing as best as you can what all those colours would look like once you've bought the shadows, got it home, made up the palette and swatched it on your arm. The closest you're going to get. And I would say do that with her swatches and not with the MAC swatches, because they are a little bit misleading, some of them. What they tend to do is scrape some of the product out of the shadow, and they put a picture of that rather than swatching it on an arm or on an eye. And therefore it can be a little bit misleading, because we all know that shadows often don't look the same in the pan as they do once you swatch them onto skin. So do check out the Temptalia one and then screenshot it. Screenshot all your swatches of the ones you picked. And I guarantee that by then you'll have eliminated some of those 10 out of 6 shadows that you pick. Okay, hopefully by now you're now ready to buy your palettes and your refills. And I'll put all the details, as I said, below. But this is what the little refills look like. You will get these through the post. You also need to order 2 other things. And I think a mistake that people can sometimes make is they order this and then they've got nothing for their eyeshadows to fit in, because it's just like that. So don't forget to order also the insert for your palette to go in. You get this. It looks like you should be trying to open it up. And I remember now that I spent ages trying to open this up before. And it doesn't open up. They just slot into there. Right. So you'll have that. You'll have that. And you'll have, if you're doing a palette of 6, you'll have your 6 colours all ready to go. And now I'm going to get on to how you make up your palette. Okay, so once you slot these shadows into this, you will be able to still see the shade names on the back, but once it goes in there, you won't. So if it's important to you and there's shades that you really like and you want to put the shade names on your palette, then what I would do is make sure that you've made a note of which shades are which before you put them in the palette. And then we'll get on to what I love to do, which is label it afterwards. Okay, so now all we're going to do is we're going to drop these into the palette like that. So I'm just going to get the others out and do the same thing. You literally just take them out of the packet and drop them into this insert. Right, I've now got my eyeshadows placed in there. Have a look at it. Decide, are you happy with the order? Because it sounds like an obvious thing to say, but you can still get these out pretty easily at the top. You can just tip it and they'll come out. But once you get this and snap it into this palette, It is actually, you can get them out again, but you're going to have to get a knife to actually dig in and get it out. So make sure that you're happy with the order they're in before you start putting it into the palette. Right, let's see if I can film this. So I then put it in here, and I'm not going to be able to film this, I don't think, but it clicks in. So I'm going to snap this in and then I'll be right back. Okay, I've actually worked out that it's not that difficult. They used to be very difficult to get out once you've actually put them in, but all you need to do is to actually press on one side and it will pop out at the end. So that's really good if you change your mind about the order or you want to check what shade you've got underneath. I can't show you because if I tip it up, then all the shadows are going to come out. But you will be able to see that underneath there is actually a circle underneath that, a little gap that you can actually see the shadow names. So it is actually very easy to get out once you put it in. And I'm just going to actually, look, there we go. We can actually do that on here. And there you have your palette. And then what all I do is I take this off, this lovely plastic thing. So I have a nice new palette now. And all I do now is I get my Dymo machine and I make some labels. And I've got some see-through labels that I can put over the top here. And then at the back, I've got the white ones that I can put if I want to put them. I like putting the names at the back and at the front. I don't know why, I just do. I think I just love my label machine. So I will show you that. Right, in case anyone's wondering what a Dymo machine is, it's just a label maker. I'm sure most people know what I'm talking about. Okay, so that's my palette made up. Now, you might not like the aesthetic of having the stickers on the front. I actually like to see what colours I'm using, especially for my channel. But if you don't want it to do it that way, you can put them on the back, or you can keep the palette in the box and you can put the stickers on the back of there. Sorry, this looks actually really messy. I think I dropped something on the box. But anyway, so that's how I made up this palette. Now, a couple of more things to say before I finish off this video. Okay, so palette done, and a couple more things to say about shades. Now, if you're looking for a good transition shade, my #1 favourite shade for MAC is no longer, it's been discontinued. It's really annoying. It was Kid. But I'm holding this upside down already. So I chose for this palette Omega, but actually a really, really good transition shade to choose, which is very similar to Kid, is soft brown. And the only reason I didn't choose it for this palette is because I've got soft brown already in another palette I made up. So I'm going to show you the other two palettes that I made up and talk you through some of those shades to give you a few ideas about colours and colour schemes that you might like. So this now is my purple and teal palette. But as you can see, I made up two earlier, a long time ago. This is my cool purple palette. And I'm going to show you that. You can see that I put the stickers on the back as well of the box. And I will show you what that looks like. There is my one. So it's got Sweet Lust, Beautiful Iris, Parfait Amour, and Indian Ink. Now with that palette, what I decided is I didn't really want a transition. I just wanted some cool purples, not the warm purples. And so I made up that palette, and then I did put this pink in there to give me a lighter shade. Okay, so that was one idea. So if you want to do a palette of 4, that's also an idea. If you like one particular colour, but you want to try, say, 3 or 4 shades of that particular colour, that's another way to go. But I also decided a while back that I was going to make up a really classic palette of shades that I love, but actually they're not exciting colours, but they will just really work well together. Browns, and golds. So this is my brown and gold palette. The first one I did, and this is actually a 9 palette pan. You can see it there. Okay, and look, I just love labelling. I think that's why I've got labels on the box and labels on there. But you can see that's the palette. Now, this is the one that I'm always going on about, that I don't think MAC do anymore, and they really should bring it back. Kid, which is the perfect transition shade. Can you see that? It's just a perfect skin colour for blending in. But if they don't have Kid, then this soft brown is the next one along. And that is also pretty good as a transition shade. So that was to give you an idea. Now, that's why I didn't get soft brown. The other thing is, in this recent palette that I did, I got White Frost as my highlighter, which is actually a pure white, but it's a shimmery white. And it's the purest white they do. But what is a perfect highlighter shade, which I would have put in there if I hadn't already got it, is this one here, and it's called Shroom. Short for mushroom, no doubt. But this one is it's an infamous shade by MAC. There it is. And it's really good for highlighting under the brow, like that. This one that I got will be okay, but it's going to be a lot brighter. A lot more white. Okay? But I just didn't want to double up on shadows I already had. And all of these shadows are just really good classic shades that I knew that I would always use. This one here, which is called Amber Lights. This is actually in my MAC. I think it's in my MAC Diwali palette. The one I got. Just works beautifully. You're always going to have room for that in your life. Woodwinked. What I will do is I'll put the details of all these palettes and the shades in them. Woodwinked is that one. I'll leave you with swatches on my arm as well, with the shade names. That again is a really good gold. This one here, which is called Honey Lust, really beautiful for putting on your mobile lid. It's a lovely sort of peachy honey shimmer shade. These are just really good staple matte browns to kind of build up intensity in the socket. Again, Embark is the darkest one. That is an infamous shade that a lot of people use. You can use that to line your lids. Really lovely chocolatey brown, but it's got a nice amount of red in it. Then this one is Chocolate Swiss, which is a little bit lighter again, but very good for putting in the socket. And then this one is Brown Script, which is a bit lighter again, but it's got more red in it. So I love this palette, because this palette is I've used this a lot because it's just their classic MAC shades. And I have used my purple palette quite a bit as well. I just wanted to mix some purples and teals, but I chose these ones so as not to double up. The other purple, this Power to the Purple is quite a new shade, but the one in my old purple palette is called Indian Ink, and you can only get it from MAC Pro. They don't do it anywhere else, and this is really pretty as well, this purple. And it's actually a bit lighter, I think, than Power to the Purple. But I'm going to put all the swatches at the end. Let me show you Power to the Purple. Yeah, it's a bit lighter and a bit dustier. So I'll put all the swatches of all three palettes at the end so that you can see. But if you've got any questions about making up a palette, or you say, Ali, I want to make up a green and gold palette, if you got any good suggestions, leave your comments below and I'll be happy to help you. I love doing this. It's such a creative thing to do. It's such fun. As I say, the only caution is that it does work out a little bit more expensive than buying one pre-made, but you get all the colours you love in it. So I think that's worth a little bit extra for that. All right, thank you for watching me. Any questions, do leave them below. Or if you want me to help you to shop for your own bespoke palette, then again, leave your comments below and I'll help you out. Take care. Love you all. Bye-bye. Mwah.